This is what kind girls do, where we think if there's a problem or if someone's upset, must be me. I must do something different. I must make sure they're not upset. I need to do something. I'm not sure what. We need to protect ourselves the way that we would protect a child. The empaths and the highly sensitive people, which I think a lot of the kind girls fall into those categories, I certainly did, will be just unbelievably attractive to the narcissist personality type people because we are perennial givers and they are perennial takers. Keep in mind, why is someone trying to manipulate anybody emotionally? It's to have power. The more power they have over you, the more power they want over you. Because the reality that that person who's supposed to protect you and love you is being bad to you is so painful. It's easier to be self-loathing than it is to admit the truth about what your situation is.
So one thing I
Yes.
talk about is how kind girls, we basically have a bullseye on our forehead that's for those boundary destroyers. Tell me what a boundary destroyer is and how do we deal with that sort of personality or that sort of attribute?
Well, the way that I lay out the people that we deal with when it comes to boundaries is we have our boundary first timers. So those are people we have relationships with, but maybe we haven't been honest with them about how we feel. Maybe we haven't told them we're upset about something, or maybe we haven't made a simple request to them. So that's a boundary first timer. Then we have the repeat offenders, where you have told them and they agree to do something different, but then they keep stepping over that boundary. And I always give an example of like, you have a conversation with your partner to say, please let me know if you're going to be late. They say they will, and then they keep not letting you know that they're going to be late, which feels very disrespectful. It's very upsetting, whatever. That is a repeat offender. With a repeat offender, we eventually have to create some kind of a consequence for the continued behavior, because it's just like with children. It's like with anyone. If there's no consequence, where is the impetus to change the behavior, right? It's there's not that much inspiration to change the behavior if there is no consequence if they continue. Um, and then we have, I talk a little bit about boundary bullies, which are people who step over the line a lot, but all of them are not boundary destroyers. So let's make the distinction between boundary destroyers are people who do not have the capacity to have compassion or have empathy for other people. Boundary destroyers are very manipulative, and they're people a lot of times with cluster B personality disorders, like narcissistic personality disorder, could be untreated bipolar, could be histrionic. Like there's a bunch that fall into this category. And they're people who are highly, highly manipulative in their relationships. And so why we need to be aware of them is because you are exactly right. The empaths and the highly sensitive people, which I think a lot of the kind girls fall into those categories, I
Yes.
certainly did,
Mm-hmm.
will be just unbelievably attractive to the narcissistic personality type people because we are perennial givers and they are perennial takers. So we're
Yes.
like, wow, I can't, they're like, it's all about me. And we're like, yay, let's make it all about you, right? We want you to be happy, but
Right.
eventually that doesn't work. So what I teach you in the book and what I'll tell you now is that the most effective way to deal with boundary destroyers and to even know that you're dealing with one is to identify the ways in which they're manipulative. We need to look at, and then you have some basic stuff that's out there that people are talking about very specifically with narcissistic personality disorder, where you'll have someone who is gaslighting you, right? Where they are trying to mess with your reality. They're trying to mess with your sanity. And I feel like you might have a little bit of experience in this, Tara,
Oh,
yourself.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
Uh-huh.
Except for I didn't even know that term at the time. I was just like, oh, it is me. Oh, what's
Yeah,
wrong
of
with
course.
me? Yes,
Yes.
because it's
Yeah,
kind of
and that's what I was just gonna say. You literally took the words right out of my mouth. This is what kind girls do, where we
Mhm.
think if there's a problem or if someone's upset, must be me. I must do something different. I must make sure they're not upset. I need to do something. I'm not sure what. So we need to look out for that and not be our own worst enemy. We
Yeah.
need to protect ourselves the way that we would protect a child that we love, because you would not allow a boundary destroyer to like manipulate and abuse your kid, you would fight for them. You would fight to stop that. You would clearly see what they were doing. So we have gaslighting is one thing to look out for. We have love bombing, where in the beginning of a romantic relationship, someone is just pouring it on thick. You're the most amazing. Everything about you is perfect. But then you're also having the experience because the intimacy might be mind blowing. They might be showering you with gifts. They might be showering you with like trips or whatever it is, really making you feel special. Like nobody else has ever understood me the way you do. Narcissists think they're so special, they're above everybody, that when they're love bombing you, and I don't even know if some narcissists even know that's what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? But of
Mhm.
course, in those moments when they're love bombing you, then you are also uniquely, amazingly special because you would have to be for them to love you,
Oh, of
basically.
course. Of course.
Oh my God, it's
So it's
exhausting.
interesting. I don't think we would naturally go for a boundary destroyer without that love bombing period, because that's where you just get everything you want that you didn't even know you want, and you have this deep
Yep,
connection or whatever it is. And
yep,
then it's interesting. I think that's also how boundary destroyers can keep you, because even when you have kind of shit hits the fan, then you've got some sort of love bombing that happens again to just get you on the perpetual wheel of not fortune.
correct. Of unfortune, the
Yeah,
unfortunate wheel of not fortune.
yeah, so true. So true.
So let's talk about other ways that they manipulate those so people can keep their eyes open for
Yes.
this. They may say to you, keep in mind, why is someone trying to manipulate anybody emotionally? It's to have power. The more power they have over you, that's the more power they want over you. They want to isolate you from your friends and family. They want you all to themselves, but they want to control you. They just want you to be pliable. They want you to shut up and do what they want you to do. They want you to feed their ego. They want you to have sex with them when they want to. They want everything. You know what I mean? So we need to look out. They'll try to, if you go up against them or if you try to push back on something, they'll be like, "Are you okay? Like, I'm really worried about you." I mean, I wasn't going to say anything, but Bob also said that he thought you might be off the rails a little bit. Are you okay? So fake concern, right? Or faux concern. And what they're doing there, of course, is saying, it's not just me who thinks you're nuts. Now our friends think you're nuts too. So keep your eyes open for that little ditty. What other manipulation tactics do they do? Well, flipping the script, right? If you go to a narcissist or one of these personality types with a complaint, you will somehow end up apologizing,
Exactly. I would
right?
say
You
if you're
will,
the one 90% apologizing in a relationship,
yep,
red flag.
exactly. You're like, whoa. But it's funny how it happens that way. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
Hold on,
It's
there we go.
easily, but knowing this ahead of time and actually having healthy boundaries, it's a lot easier to see that type of person than in that sort of situations when you're aware of it. As a kind
Yep.
girl, I was not, you think everyone's like you. I had no concept that people actually
Yes.
do this for control, manipulation, all of that. And that's their normal. So it's
But we
very,
should talk about what you just said, though, Tara. You made this great point, which is that it's called positive projection. That when you're a
yeah,
kind girl, you project all of your wonderful qualities onto people who you don't know if they actually have those qualities. But we make assumptions that are to our detriment. Instead of taking it slow, letting people prove, show us, tell us with their actions and their words who they are, we sort of just believe them and we go, well, nobody would be like that though. I mean, who would do that? Just because you wouldn't do it doesn't mean other people wouldn't do it. So we, especially as empaths and kind girls, we got to look out for positive projection.
yes. And actions. Because I feel like so many times they can
Mm-hmm.
say the right words, but is it
Yep.
lining up with their actions? Is it
Yeah. Yeah.
repeating? Is it happening over and over? Am
Yeah.
I being too quick to forgive? That
Right.
ever forgiving. So that's very interesting.
Exactly. I think you also have to really be mindful of how much of the time we blame ourselves for all the things. And the self blame is also a way of, it's a bid for control. right? So we want to control the situation. And if we're the problem, we can do something about it. If they're the problem, we feel more. It's the same way that kids, you could be a kid in an abusive situation, and the kid will think, oh, if I just got better grades, maybe dad wouldn't drink. Or if I just did this, maybe mom wouldn't hit me. And it's like, because the reality that that person who's supposed to protect you and love you is being bad to you is so painful. It's easier to be self-loathing than it is to admit the truth about what your situation is, you know?
Definitely.
Have you gone through a breakup that's kind of left you rattled and maybe questioning yourself some? Do you find that you're a pretty kind person that's chronically overgiving, overfunctioning, and maybe you're just plain tired and maybe a little resentful? Do you feel like you're going through the motions of life, but you're not really living your life? Well, that's what the Unravel Notebook is for. It's 61 days for you to create your life by intent and unravel your thoughts and beliefs so you can connect with God, yourself, and others in a better, more intentional way and live brighter.
You want to talk about that? A lot of this comes from originally, and you touched on this, the boundary blueprint. Like, where do we get these ideas and beliefs?
Yeah.
And how important is it to examine that boundary blueprint? So talk a little bit more about that.
Yes. In the book, Boundary Boss, I give you, I mean, this is really what we build our healing on. And it is, I want you to think about your blueprint, your downloaded boundary blueprint, as like a blueprint for an architectural blueprint for a house that someone else designed like decades ago, maybe a century ago, where this gets handed down from generation to generation. So with boundaries, we learn this is the way you're supposed to be in relationships, right? This is how it is. This is the way marriages are. This is the way friendships are. This is the way. And so it's not just your family of origin, it's your family of origin, but then we're also influenced by country, culture of origin, the society that we grow up in, because there's different societal norms, whether you're middle class, whether you're from a more upper class, whether you're from a lower class, and families themselves have these unique familial norms of how we're supposed to behave. So what people don't understand is that that's not the only way it can be. But this stuff is very unconscious. So in the book, I walk you through questions so you can really look to go, how was my mother or the mother figure in your life? Were they a pushover? Were they a people pleaser? Were they twisting themselves up in a pretzel and lighting themselves on fire to keep other people warm? Like, was that happening in your life? And did you see that as, oh, this is what it is to be feminine? So all of these things that happen and everything that makes up your downloaded blueprint, that this is how you come into the world. You grow up and you go, okay, this is how it's supposed to be. What I'm teaching you is that potentially is just how it was for your family. But it actually doesn't have to be that way for you. That once you're aware of what is in your downloaded blueprint, the notions, the limiting beliefs, whatever it is, you can change it just as you have, just as I have. Like, we can actually just change it and go, no, I don't want that in my family system. There was a bit of male bashing where, not horrible, but like a lot of women, and like nobody thought guys were all that great. And, there was a lot of comments like, well, you know how men are, type of thing, And I remember in therapy talking about this and being like, I don't want to feel that way about men.
Yes.
I don't think it's true about all men. I think I can find a man who could be my friend and my partner and my lover and my best person. I don't want to manage. I saw my mother managing my father. Ugh, that just looked so not what I wanted. But I really had to understand what was in my blueprint in order to change it. And it's not that hard, you guys. You'll see, once you start learning to think this way, you're going to be like, oh, I've got to go back in time. I've got to look at the past to make a different future. And you do. That's how we do it. So I feel like with some therapists, they want to talk about third grade for like 25 years. Like, here's the thing. I'm not one of those therapists. I want to talk about third grade. If something happened in third grade that is still negatively impacting Tara's life today, then I would really want to talk about it. But we do have to go back to what I call the scene of the crime because that is where all of these ingrained patterns and limiting beliefs, it's not the only place, but it's usually the biggest place that they were planted.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's 90% of our subconscious is running our life. And that's where it's planted, where we're not even aware of those beliefs. I mean, we've just automatically adopted them. I remember feeling the same way about my parents' marriage, like, that's not what I want. And then I repeat it. And it's because I didn't really look at that boundary blueprint and what those beliefs all entail. It's just interesting, my family system, it was considered godly to be like the sacrificial person. And that's a generational thing. So just generations of that. And it's definitely not healthy, very destructive, and has some deep ramifications.
Yeah. And has nothing to do with God.
No,
Because
not
any
at all.
God that you
Actually,
could
the
believe in,
antithesis.
exactly. That is the opposite of the God that I believe in,
Yes.
does not want me to be abused by somebody in the name of being holy.
Oh,
You
and
know?
that's what's so funny is you look at Jesus and his life, and he's like, no, that is absolutely not okay. And no, all
Right.
of these limits. And yet
Right.
I still adopted that whole onset. So it's really good to just like really detail look at that, like you said. And you go through that process in your book, which is fabulous.
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
I would call like a kind girl or my way of being, you really term like a high functional codependent. Could you
Yeah.
tell me like how does somebody know they're a high functional codependent and what are the challenge that that creates?
Well, if you're very tired, if you're doing all the things for all the people, if you're constantly involved and worried about other people. I mean, my definition of high functioning codependency, we'll talk about codependency and then I'll tell you why I created this, coined this phrase. Codependency is being overly invested in the feeling states, the outcomes, the relationships, the circumstances of the people in our lives to the detriment of our internal peace, right? So this is not, as lovers, as mothers, as friends, as caring people. Of course, we care about the people we love, right? Of course, we're invested in their happiness. But when you're an HFC, a high functioning codependent, you're overly invested. So even in sort of taking on the responsibility that you feel like it's on you to make those changes, it's on you to save that person from this bad decision they're making, right? It's on you to intervene or to, if they need money and they're going to get kicked out of their apartment, you're like, well, how can I let them get evicted? As if it's you letting them get evicted. So if any of that sounds where you feel like you're doing all the things for other people, you probably are a high functioning codependent. And the reason why I added the high functioning piece is because my clients, who are all very high functioning women, they did not identify with the old school definition of codependency, where it feels like it's only enabling an addict. You have to be involved with someone who's an alcoholic. You know, codependency, it seemed so like weak, quote unquote. At least that's how they perceived it.
Yes.
And so it got in the way of me doing the work I needed to do with them because they couldn't see themselves in the definition of the thing that they definitely were. Right? I was like, oh, my people don't know what codependency is. This is what the problem is. So as soon as I added high functioning to it, they were like, the problem is me, for sure. Like nobody had a problem raising their hand after that because they understood what I was saying. Because another part of codependency that we don't talk about a lot is that so much of the time as codependents, we want to control other people. We do not want you making that mistake. We want to help you. We don't want you to be in pain. We don't want you to fail. We don't want you to get fired. We don't, all the things. But we overstep boundaries when we're high functioning codependents because we are so unclear about what is my side of the street and what is someone else's side of the street. And so that's what my next book, which comes out in October, is on. It's called Too Much. And it's about how to stop the cycle of high functioning codependency in your life. Because if you don't, what ends up happening again is that people don't know you. You do all the things for all the people. And in the end of life, you're like, wow, is this all there is? And the thing is, no, this is not all there is. But we need to live a different life and let people We need to learn to let the chips fall where they may when they're not our chips.
And that's huge. I remember I felt very responsible for my husband's happiness. And that was a big deal. And I chronically, Terry, have to ask myself, is this on my side of the street or is this on the other person's
Yep.
side of the
Yep.
street? And ask that question and really, you know, my happiness is my responsibility. Their happiness is their responsibility. Their
Correct.
this and this and this is their responsibility. And constantly kind of aligning with that. Because that's a big deal. And it's so easy to like slip into that and you don't even know it. It's very, very easy. So
Especially if we've been doing it naturally. When you think about the way we're raised, we are the caretakers, we're the assuagers, right? We're the fixers, we're the bridgers in families too. And so of course we know everything. Think about it. You know everything about what do I love to say? We have a stadium full of data about the people in our lives, in our minds. We know who eats what. We know who doesn't like what. We know who has what allergy. We know it all. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but what tends to happen with HFCs is that nobody knows those things about us. When you're really actively high functioning codependent, you know all those things about other people, but they don't know them. Like really nobody knows that about us. We're very much like a little island, and it becomes very lonely, you know?
absolutely. I can't wait for that book to come out. That's going to be amazing. And Terry,
Thanks.
your work has changed so many people's lives. Can you give us some examples of people's, I know your life was changed. You have a beautiful relationship with your husband. My life was changed by boundaries, a beautiful relationship with my husband. But there's so many great stories that you've experienced. Can you just share a few stories of how having boundaries and going through the work of this, how it can impact someone's life for the better?
Yeah, I mean, some of the ones that stand out, I mean, thousands upon thousands of people, truthfully,
Yes.
just being like, wow, boundaries are the joint. Like, this is my jam now. I love it. But I had a guy, a husband, say, I started watching your boundary stuff, and I didn't realize how abusive I was to my wife. She was on the verge of leaving me, and we've been together many, many years, and she kept threatening she was going to do it. I had no idea. I really didn't. And she said, if you want me to even think about staying, you have to watch some of these videos. So she basically made him watch some videos. And he wrote to me, this big, gruff guy, is what I imagine, saying he was watching the videos with her, crying his eyes out, realizing how unkind he'd been and how tone deaf and all the things. And they're working their way back. But that really touched me, that it was because I have a lot of women, of course, in my crew. But this, for him to go out of his way to write me a note
That's
and
fabulous.
saying, I was bawling my eyes out like a baby, but I so appreciate what you're putting out there in the world. And we're now watching all of your videos together, and we're also getting into couples counseling and whatever. So that was one story. And then I had someone else from my group who had just a terrible family situation with adult siblings and had a lot of abuse in her background. And she learned from being able to really become more of a boundary boss. She took my course, she read the book, and she just wrote to me 2 days ago, actually, saying, you're not going to believe that I actually was able to call a family meeting about taking care of my mother with Alzheimer's, who of course abused everybody. And she was like, I didn't let my brothers run me over in the meeting. I'm not doing everything now. We are equitably splitting up the care for her financially and otherwise. Like, she's like, it's a miracle. And I was like, dude, you know what? Here's the thing. It can feel miraculous, but it isn't a miracle because every person listening, is capable of changing their life in this way. I gave that person ideas and thoughts and proactive things she could do. She did them. And she did them whether her brothers had responded positively or not. Her healing was already in the fact that she just stopped putting up with shit from them, right? She just stopped putting up with crap from her brothers. That was the biggest healing for her. And then the rest of it is just gravy. If we can work it out, and I'm great, because she was very clear. I'm not doing everything for mom. I'm not paying for it all, and I'm not doing everything. But I want everyone listening to know This is for you too. This is possible for you too, because Tara, you've seen it, I've seen it, like tens of thousands, zillions of people. You can do it. So no matter how hopeless it may feel, or no matter how sort of boxed in you may feel in whatever situation you're in, I promise you, there is hope.
Yes. So if somebody's feeling like stuck or going through the motions, they can change. And that's always the power in it. And your book is great because it really does break it down, help us understand it step by step. It gives scripts, all sorts of things. But you also have your workbook. You've got your workbook. You also have online courses. Can you tell us about some of your online courses? Because they're fabulous as well.
Well, the Boundary Bootcamp is one that people who are really interested in boundaries, there's that. I have a mother wound course. I have a Real Love Revolution, which is a 3-month experience, which I love. And that's really all about love. Real Love Revolution is about love. It's about more self-love and better quality love in your relationships. Again, it all comes back to how we relate to ourselves, of course. So you guys can find all of that stuff. And also, if you like, I've got a podcast I have over 600 episodes that are all free, and you can watch it on YouTube, or you can go to, iTunes. So it's just called The Terri Cole Show.
And that's fabulous. And then they can reach you on terricole.com. Is that correct?
terricole.com, and also Instagram. I'm just at Terri Cole if you want to follow me. I put out a ton of free stuff. So if you're looking for free resources, you know where to get them.
Okay, and I'm excited about your new book coming out in October. So my last question is, this podcast is all about living brighter in the world. And how do you've got a lot of things going on, you're living bright, but how do you maintain and nurture that brightness for yourself?
Yeah. I mean, daily meditation is one way. Practicing what I preach is another. So regularly having hard conversations, being truthful about what I need, how I feel, what I want, even when it's hard. And even as a boundary master, it's still hard. But being truthful is how I live brighter, because it fuels me to have the people in my life actually know me, right? Actually know me. And if I'm not telling the truth, then they can't,
Yeah, those are great tools to live brighter. Thanks for sharing that. So
Sure.
I have a copy. This book has been very well loved. And the Boundary Workbook, woohoo! And all your good stuff. Can't wait for your new in October. Thank you so much for your time, Terri. I so appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you so much for what you're doing in the world. I really appreciate you, Tara.
Oh, thanks.
Stay tuned for our next episode.